So I was reading the Washington Post this week, and a headline caught my eye. It was this: "Don't save Social Security." It was an opinion piece, and I don't know if you read the Washington Post, but it's very clear to me that the editorial board of the Washington Post is well aware that they are employed by a billionaire these days. And so that's the kind of stuff they're serving up. So I thought, oh, this is going to be a let them eat cake sort of opinion. And sure enough, I look at the author, and it says at the bottom, his name is Ramesh Ponnuru. He's the editor of the National Review. He's a fellow of the American Enterprise Institute. I'm like, okay, well, I'm reading this, though. What's he going to say about Social Security? But to tell you the truth, I was surprised by the way it began. He shared some data that showed Social Security sends only 7% of its benefits to the poorest 20% of seniors and 29% to the richest 20% of seniors. And I think most of us know this is how Social Security works, right? So you put money in, the more you put in, the more you get back. And of course, that's very United States, right? So that the rich even get richer in retirement. So anyway, he went on to say that even with Social Security that we all pay into, 6% of seniors in the U.S. live in poverty. So imagine that. You've worked your whole life, you paid into this thing your whole life, 6% in this wealthy nation still live in poverty. And then he shared this, that the Congressional Budget Office recently found in a study that if everyone older than 65 were given a flat annual benefit worth 150% of the poverty line, Social Security would no longer be insolvent, and senior poverty would be abolished. Wow. So now we're in Lent, and here's my confession of sin. When I read that, there was a little voice in my head that said, sure, that might be true, but that's not fair. Deb and I have been paying into Social Security since we were teenagers. That's our money. We deserve what we owe back. You can't cut our benefits. So some background here. About 10 years ago, I was on a week-long retreat that was sponsored by the wider church. It was trying to make clergy healthy. So it was body, mind, spirit, all these things. And in preparation for the retreat, we had to gather up all of our financial information. We had to, create our budgets and all this, and hand it over to two financial advisors who were going to meet with us and tell us, how we were doing. And so I found out when I got there, I was the oldest person on this retreat by about 10 years, and I was super nervous. Like, if I've screwed up, right? There's no correcting this. So near the end of the week, I met down with these two guys. They'd worked for the Board of Pensions, and when we met, they said, oh, you're in great shape. You're in better shape than most clergy. You have nothing to worry about at all. Nothing to worry about. And yet there's this voice within me, this little voice that's ready to ask, what about me? Even in the face of a proposal that would lift every senior in this country out of poverty, but what about me? So Jesus was well aware of that voice, and it is in all of us, and it is not who we truly are. And if we listen to that voice, we will be led into unhappiness. So we have to become more aware of that voice when it comes up, so we're not led astray. And I think if you ask most billionaires about that voice, they would say, what voice? Never heard a voice like that. So how else could you own billions of dollars and remain indifferent about the suffering of your fellow human beings? How could you own billions of dollars and live in a country where children go to bed hungry at night? Or worse than that, how could you be the richest man on earth and oversee a government agency that slashed food and medical aid to the most vulnerable populations on this earth? So I wonder, do you think billionaires think to themselves, I'm rich, but I am a terrible human being. I am a terrible human being. I don't think so. I don't think they think that. I think that they are completely conscious. And so we need to be aware of that voice when it arises in us so we protect our own happiness and the well-being of our neighbors. So at any rate, in today's gospel, Jesus is not speaking to billionaires. He's up on a mountaintop, he's teaching his disciples, and some crowds that have gathered around are overhearing his teaching. So he's teaching us. And as I said at the outset of this sermon series, he's teaching us that we are already blessed. Blessed are you. He's teaching us the secret of happiness. So when we get to today's gospel lesson, Jesus begins, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth." So this alone is utterly confounding to most Americans, right? So we are taught from an early age that storing up treasure is what life is all about. And the better you are at that, the better you are as an American. So how could you possibly be happy without money in the bank to guarantee your security? But Jesus says, isn't life so much more than food and clothing? So as I said on Ash Wednesday, it's perfectly fine to enjoy this material world, right? In fact, we should enjoy and have deep gratitude for all the beauty of creation that sustains us day by day. But trying to grab it all for yourself and put it in a bank, that's not gratitude. That's called fear. That's called anxiety. That's called worry. So we need to develop practices where we can fully enjoy this material world, but also understand that everything in this material world is temporary, and it will pass away, and it will never satisfy our deepest needs. As Jesus says, and he says this twice, moths and rust and thieves are coming to take away all of our things, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. So go ahead and enjoy this material world, but don't get too attached so that you're in despair when those things take it away. So, for instance, you don't have to grieve that an apple has to die for you to enjoy eating it. It's just the nature of things. So enjoy the apple. It will live on in you. So here's a different way to think about money and other material things. What if we thought about them this way, that these things come and go, not to make us miserable, but to bring us the joy of life. So if that were true, we could be just as content when something arrives and just as content when it leaves us, when it dies. And if we truly lived life this way, we would not have to build giant storehouses for all the apples we could find, so we would be sure that we would have an apple anytime we wanted one. We could just trust that when one apple is gone, another apple arises. And after all, we know that's how apples work, right? That's why they're full of seeds. That's how they work. So if we trust this, we're still fed, and we're free from all the worry about piling up apples in a barnyard. We're free from all of the worry about our savings. So Jesus teaches us, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. And he offers this teaching not to diminish us, but to set us free. And in true form, Jesus does not leave us hanging with this teaching that does, as I said, go against everything we've been taught since we were little. No, he offers us a spiritual practice to free us from our worries about money and wealth. And so he says, look at the birds. You're worried? Look at the birds. You're worried? Consider the lilies. So these birds and these lilies, they don't worry about anything, and yet they have everything they need. So look at the birds does not mean think about birds. It doesn't mean go find a book about birds and read it. It literally means go outside and look at birds. Again, if you're worried, go outside and look at birds. And likewise, consider the lilies doesn't mean think about flowers. It literally means consider well, notice, study, or even learn from. And that's the one I like. Learn from the lilies of the field. Again, you got to go outside and learn from them. So on Thursday afternoon, I was sitting on our deck and enjoying a late cup of coffee and thinking about all this. And I looked up at these two towering pine trees that are just off our deck. And they've obviously grown up together. At their base, they're like about this far apart, but way up, they're only like maybe 3 feet apart. So they've been growing right next to each other for a long time. And they're just sitting there. And they're enjoying the sunshine, and their long needles are gently moving in the wind. And I looked up at them and I said, "What are you two doing? Are you just going to stand there and waste the whole day?" But I suppose that's how they've always been. They don't have much ambition, right? For decades, they've just been standing there in that same place, enjoying the sun and the rain, not too bothered by the snow and the wind, not worried if there's going to be enough for them to eat or drink tomorrow, just standing there in the sunshine, in the rain, one with life. So those trees are not birds or lilies, but I think this is exactly what Jesus had in mind. Are you worried about something? Go outside and look at the birds. And what will you discover? Birds don't have bank accounts, or cars, or hospitals, or grocery stores, or stocks, or bonds. And yet they are filled with life, and they have more than they could ever need. So if God so provides for the birds of the air, how much more for you? So do you doubt this? He says, "You of little faith, do you doubt this?" So one proof of this is that you and I are here today. So whatever the storms of life have brought you, here we are today. And that means every single day of your life. So the little ones are gone. Some of us are 5 years old. Some are 10, 20, 30, 60, 80. Every day of your life, you had enough to get to the next day. That's the proof of this. We have all had enough to sustain us. So a final practice Jesus offers in this passage is simply to live in the present moment, live in the here and now. So he says, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring worries of its own. Today's trouble is enough for today." So just live for today, in the present moment. And as I've often said, when you think about it, 98% of the time, and I've said this before, this isn't scientific, but I think it's about right, 98% of the time, nothing is happening to disturb our peace, right? Think about that. You're just there. It's fine. It's just something you heard on the radio. It's something you're worried about in the future. But 98% of the time, in the present moment, nothing is happening to us to disturb our peace. So the here and now is actually a really nice place to be. So why then would we ever let our minds take us out of the present moment? Why would we allow our worry to rob us of the beauty all around us? Why would we allow, "What about me?" to erase all that we have been given? So here's something to consider. 2,000 plus years ago, Jesus' disciples had worries. Way back then, those people had worries. And the crowd around him on that mountain, they had anxiety. So why else would he tell them not to worry? And I suppose that means it's just human nature to worry. But I wonder, what were they worried about back then? And then I wonder, what happened to all those worries they had when they died? Did anyone say, "Oh, these worries were really important to them. We better pick them up and carry them around for them"? No, of course not. And it's really the same with us. What are you worried about today? And what will happen to those worries when you die? Will there be someone there to pick them up and carry them around for you? Of course not. So why not drop them today? Why not drop them today and be set free? Thanks be to you, Lord Jesus Christ, for this wisdom that gives us back our lives. Amen.